Hi, welcome. So we are going to look at if function today. Remember, it's a very important function for an analyst or when you're learning functions in Excel. In the previous videos, we did some intro to formula generally. So it's always good to go back and look at that. And then in the last video, we also did some text functions and date functions. So it's just good to look at that. Now we're going to look at if, and if is very, very interesting. And it's something that like an analyst, you must know, and it's going to help you even if you want to learn Python, programming, SQL, Power BI, everywhere you go, you would always need to use some if statements. Even as a web developer or whatever, you might always need to use some if statements. If this username is in our database, or if the password is correct, then give him access to this page. If the password is not correct, then don't give him access to this page. So you would always need this if, and I'll try to break it down to you so that you can be able to understand these concepts and use them wherever you need them. So let's just go straight to the computer and look at the if function. Okay, so here we looked at the date functions and the text functions last time. So I'll just create a new sheet, increase it here, zoom in, and we're going to look at the if function. But before we do that, remember we had a previous video, the intro to formula. If you haven't looked at it, it's good to go check it out, because you're going to get some basic things like the logical operators. So some of the operators, the logical operators, remember, like when you are talking about greater than, because these are conditions that are either true or not true, and that's where if comes in. So maybe less than, you have equal to, or not equal to. So we did that in a previous video. Just go check it out and be sure it's okay. So you like greater than is this sign, for example, less than is this sign, equal to is this sign, and then there's not equal to, and there's less than and equal to, or greater than and equal to, which we would see here. So these are important because it's able to tell you, is this condition true or not? Because the whole thing if once is to say, is it true? If it's true, what should I do? Like we said in the case of the web developer or whatever, if this password is correct, what should I do? If it's not correct, what should I do? So you should always think of if, like there is a true condition and there is a false condition. So let's see here. For example, there's a first number, number 1, number A or 1, and then there's second number, number 2. So let's say number 1 is 3, and then number 2 is 4. So we could be doing some validation, some check with the if statement. So we could be checking some things. So we can say if 3 is less than 4, or if number 1 is less than number 4, then do something. Maybe we can say, okay, number 3 is lesser number, or it can lead to anything after that. Or if number 1 is greater than number 4, then do something. So which means that, for example, if we have this, we can say equal to, remember we have to use our equal to again, and then we put if, and then what does if say? Checks whether a condition is met and returns one value if true and another value if false. That's the thing, it's either true or it's false. It doesn't return like 5 or 8 or 7 or 12, it just returns true or false. So when you say if number 1, which is whatever value is there, like 3 in this case, is greater than number 4, it will either say true or false. So if, I'll open this bracket. Now, what's the first thing? It needs a logical test. So what are you testing? So it is saying that what should I test? And the result must either give me true or false. The result should not give anything else. So if now we would say the value which is here, I'm going to click there, is greater than the value which is here, that is the test. So there is always a test. You test something and the outcome can be true or false. This is the test. Now I press comma, then the thing says, okay, what if the result turns out to be true? What if the value is true? So I can put anything here. I can say, if I test and the 3 is greater than 4, then I should say 1, or I should say 0, or I can simply write the first number is bigger than the second number, or I can write something else, or I can even say divide something by something. So the if opens up the world to so many possibilities. So let's just make it simple. So we can say if the first one is greater than the smaller one, then we can just say, for example, put a text here. So I can just write a text and say number one is bigger or greater, or whatever you choose is bigger. Close it. And then now the thing is that yes, it's true, but what if it's false? So that is why you must always end with the value if false, which is the third argument, which says what if you test the number 1 and check if it's greater than number 2 and it's not true. What should I return? Then we would say number 2 is greater. So we can say here number 2. So it's just like the opposite conclusion. Number 2 is definitely greater. Is greater. Or is bigger. It's bigger. Or you can say number 1 is lesser. Whatever you say. So now I'm putting it like a text because I'm just giving it what it should give me like output. I could still put like a number, put 1 or put 0, depending on what I need to use the if statement, the if output for. So I close this, and then now what do I get? So it's telling me number 2 is bigger. Let me double click here so we can read all this clearly. So now what if I change this to 10? What do we expect? We expect it to change from number 2 is bigger to number 1 is bigger, because obviously 10 is bigger than 4. So if I press enter, it works. So we get number 1 is bigger, like the checking or the answer. So your if, you see, you could use it to get any. So this might be an input to another function. So I could even come here and maybe I don't want to put number 1 is bigger. I just say when that happens, put me 1. Let me get that like this. Then if the value is true, let me just take this off. If the value is true, return 1. If it is false, return 0. Maybe what I need here is just 1 and 0 to be able to maybe add another column here and multiply this by 1 or by 0 to continue my calculation. So this is like an intermediary step in some processing I'm trying to do. So 10 is 10 greater than 4, then give me 1. If it is 2 here or 1 here, then give me 0. So I could use this and then maybe put something by here where I multiply this value by it, or so, times something else, maybe times maybe 2 or so. So this will be 0, and when this is maybe 4 or 5, this would be 2. So that is just for you to understand how the if and the else work. Okay, now what happens now if in one situation the number is 4 here, number 1 is 4, and number 2 is 4. So we can't say 4 is bigger than 4 or 4 is less than 4. So we need to be able to add another condition which says it is equal to. So let me go back. I'll go undo till I get the bigger than or the less than. Bigger, go, yeah. So I get this. So I have this number 1 is bigger and number 2 is bigger. So we will need to add another condition, which is what we call the nested if, because we need to add another if statement inside an if statement. And this could go long, 10, 12. You could add many if inside ifs and another if. So let's just do it and you see, and you'll be able to understand it. So now we need to add the condition. Number 1 can be bigger than number 2. Number 1 can be less than number 2. And number 1 can be equal to number 2. So let's use nested if now, because we have this third case. So we are going to go here. We are going to say, okay, if B9 is greater than C9, which is this one, number 1 greater than number 2, then we say number one is bigger, that means the condition is true that number one is bigger. The if statement should end there and conclude that number one is bigger, and normally it should be the answer. But now, what if number one is not bigger? Then there are two conditions again. Either number one is equal to number two, or number one is less than number two. Because the first one has failed, it's clear that number one is not as big as number two. So say for example, let me just put here 2. So if we say number one is bigger, so if it checks and it sees that this 2 is bigger than 4, it will stop here. But now that 2 is not bigger than 4, it needs to do a second check, and that's when we are going to do the second if, which is now we are going to say if, open another if again, open that. So let me just cancel this so that you don't get confused. I'll type it again. But now we create another if statement. And then the if now says, okay, given that I know that you've checked if number one is greater than number 2, and it must have failed, because if you come to this second if, it means this first condition was not true. If it was true, it would have ended here. So it still needs to do now a second check, which needs to say, okay, check again now if maybe this one, number 2, is less than 4. Check now. And if that is true, then now you would say that number 2 is bigger. So, which means that it first checks if number 1 is bigger. When it sees that number 1 is not bigger, you should do a second check. That's when you bring this second if and check now that is number 1 smaller than number 2. As is the case here, 2 is less than 4. So it means it's going to end here. And it will say, okay, number 2 is bigger. But what if we had 4 here and 4 here? So it means that if all these two conditions fail, if number 1 is not bigger, number 2 is not bigger, then that's when you take the only value else value. If everything else has failed, the only option that is left is that number 1 equals number 2. So I put that in quotes. So if I put enter, why it's asking this is because it wants you to add the brackets here. So let me do that, and then you see. So if you see the syntax, if B9 greater than C9, number 1 is bigger. Check again. If B9 less than C9, number 2 is bigger. If all of these two are not true, then the only answer is that number 1 equals number 2. So let's try that now. And if we put 4 here, now we are going to get number 1 equals number 2. And if we put maybe 8 here, we are going to get number 1 is bigger. So this is an example of how you can use nested if and your if statement to be able to come up with very powerful decisions. So again, as I said, I'm just putting number 1 is bigger, number 1 is greater. You could still have just put, maybe if the condition occurs, this should be 1. If this happens, this should be 2. And if this happens, this should be 3. Or if this happens, this should be 1, this should be 2, this should be 0, depending on what you want to use the output for. So it just depends on the chain, what you're trying, the process you're trying to accomplish with all of these if statements. So let's just say one example for you to understand, a practical example again in a company. Let's just say there's a company with commissions. So we are saying if you sell there's a number of cartons of maybe products that you sell. Let's say we are selling sugar or milk, or so the sales, we are trying to motivate the sales team. So if you sell a certain number of cartons, then you can get maybe this commission. So let's just say you get these commissions here. So if you sell again, let's say 4 cartons, then you get the commission of 5. So this is going to bring you to your problem framing. Remember, in an earlier video we talked about the analytics process. You need to understand what are the constraints or what are the rules. So the company says anything less than 4, give maybe let's just say anything less than 4, give them five dollars or £5 or £5, and anything greater than 4, give maybe 10 or 15, 10. So you now are able to use if to solve this problem. But before then, you got the business problem, you understood the rules, you got these laws, and then now you come to your Excel and you are trying to build a model for that. So let's say you have a sales report which says there maybe the names of the salespeople, the staff, and then you have maybe their performance or their sales, what they did. And then what you want to calculate now is their commissions. So the staff name is John, and then he sold, let's get somebody below the 5. So he sold maybe 4 cartons, 3 cartons. Let's get somebody below the 4 cartons level. So 3 cartons. And then we have Mary sold maybe, let's say, 8 cartons. And then now we have maybe Peter, who sold maybe 2 cartons, and then Mike sold maybe 1 carton. So what would be the commissions here? The commissions are saying that equals to if this value here is less than 4, like you saw there. So if we sell less than 4, then we are going to give you a commission of 5. So we can just put the 5 there, or else anything else we are going to give you 10. So if you close this and you put it, you'll see that as expected, if we pull this formula down, John gets $5 or £5 or whatever because he sold 3, and because 3 is in this range of less than 4. Mary gets 8. Mary gets 10 because she sold 8, and 8 is this range of above 5, between 5 and 10. Peter gets 2 because Peter is in this range of between 0 and 4. Peter gets 5 because Peter is in the range of between 0 and 4. Mike gets 5 too because Mike is in that range of 0 and 4. So you can see that you can use this if to be able to come up with commissions like this and clearly partition. So this could be maybe lots of stuff. You just pull this formula down, you get the performance report, what did each person sell, you pull it right down, and then you're able to get the right answer. So now here we have talked about less than, less than 4, greater than 4. So what if is equal to 4? So again, you could come up with your rules and say this is an easier way to do it. You could say from 0 to let's say 3, you get a 5. Then you say here, down here, I'll just take this one up here, take it up. So then 4, for example, I'm just showing you, so you see 4, you get maybe 8, and then let's just say 0 to 3 cartons. So just so you to see how you can use nested if, you get that, then 4 cartons. So you're trying to set the rules. First, you have gone into the business meeting and you've understood the problem. So now you're saying now, okay, above 4 cartons, that's what you get. So these are the different conditions now: 0 to 3, 4 equal to 4, above 4. So which means you need to modify your thing here. Let's say this person had 4 and is supposed to get 8 here. So you would say here that equal to, if H9 is less than 3 now, and now you need to say either you can say less than equal to 3 because 3 is included, or you say less than 4, assuming that there is no half carton, there's no 3.5, there's no 3.9. So you can say if that is less than maybe 4, then you say put 5, which means it's 0 to 3 carton. Then you need a second if statement again to say, okay, if that same value is now equal to 4, then you put this second value, which is 8, and if everything else fails, then it's not less than, it's not 0 to 3, it's not 4, then it means obviously it's 10. So when you do that, it's because of the parentheses. So if you look at the formula here, if 9 this get less than 4, give 5. If it's the case that it's not 0 to 3, then it means it's either 4 or above cartons. So if this is equal to 4, then give 8, and otherwise give 10. So let's run this now, and then let's go down here, and you see that here, what do I get? Okay, now this is the relative formula, remember. So here, because I took the h4 from here, so if you don't want it to move, you're supposed to make it fixed. So remember, we looked at the fixed and relative for how to use relative and fixed references in a previous video. So what do you need to do here? You just put the 8 directly here, and then you have your 5, 8, and 10. You press enter, then you pull it here. So you see, wherever you have the 4, you have the 8, and then below from 0 to 3 cartons, you have 5, which is this 5 here. Anything above 5 carton, anything above 3 cartons here, like this one. So like the 4 here, you have 8, and then this 8, you have 10. So I hope you have understood how to use if and nested if. And with this example, I've been able to show you how you can just use it in a company settings and in very, very interesting ways. So let's continue to learn the other functions, like how to use if and or, and then other things like the sum ifs, other interesting functions as we go along with this series. So see you next video. Wish you good data luck.